Hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us tonight on this beautiful Alaska evening for APC's Jurors lecture with Jennifer Spelman. I want to thank all of you for coming out and joining us tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Petra Leszecki, and I'm on the board of the Alaska Photographic Center. Our juror this year, Jennifer, we've been talking to her to try and get her to jury for us for a couple of years. She has a very, very busy travel schedule, which she'll tell you about, no doubt, later on. But before I introduce her, there are a couple of announcements I would like to make tonight. Rarefied Light has a birthday this year, a big one, 40 years. We've been around for 40 years, which is hard to imagine. I haven't been involved with the Alaska Photographic Center for that time, but for considerable time of it. So we are planning a little get together sometime before a celebration before the end of the year, and we'll keep you posted. So look out on our website, through social media, to find out more about that once we've put a date on it, an exact date on it. We also are continuing our third Tuesday lectures as of September, and I also encourage you to keep a lookout on our website and social media regarding those. Rarefied Light 2023 is going to be a wonderful show, I'm sure. And I will be able tonight to announce Best of Show and honorable. We have 6 honorable mentions. And so let me start with that. Actually, I'm going to start with a few words that Jennifer wrote about the images. She says, "Lovely, lovely work. I wanted the selection to create an exhibit full of wonder, of nature and man, and all of the infinite ways to visually interpret how this world feels. Thank you for letting me be a part of crafting the exhibit. It has been a pleasure to spend time with the images." We had 391 entries by 65 Alaska artists, and Jennifer chose 46 images by 35 artists. So I want to thank all of the participants for handing work into Rarefied Light. And for those of you who did not get into the show, please be encouraged to join again next year. And thank you so much for supporting us. Our Best of Show this year is Dennis Walworth from Anchorage with a piece called Floating on Feathers of Frost. The first honorable mention goes to Brian Beckwith from Eagle River, and his piece is called Nova Ascends. Second honorable mention is by Lauren Holmes from Anchorage for Sled Dog Crossing. The third one is by Jason Lazarus from Fairbanks, and it's called Vasquez Rocks, Agua. And Jason, I'm going to ask you, is it dulce or dulce? Dulce. Dulce, in California. Another honorable mention goes to Richard Murphy from Anchorage. Bird Creek Ice is the name of his piece. Another one by Kevin Smith from Anchorage called Kivalina Road 1. And last but not least, a piece by Carrie Tasker from Anchorage, and it's called Intersect. Congratulations to all of you. We will be in touch with you regarding prizes, and the other artists who will be in the show will hear from us and from Cafe next week. And there will be, obviously, the names. You'll find out which pieces are in the show. And we are also going to send some instructions out regarding drop off, time schedule, framing, all of those things. And I want to, again, thank you all and congratulations. There is going to be a framing class in late August. So also, if you are uncertain how to frame or mat or have questions regarding that, if you're not familiar with doing that, two of our board members, Jason and Young, are going to be doing a framing class towards the end of August. So we'll keep you posted on that. Let me see here. Workshop, Jennifer is teaching a workshop starting tomorrow evening and lasting over the weekend. Apparently there's one spot available, and if any of you are interested, please email us and we'll set you up. So, well, let me get ready to introduce Jennifer. There is a little something I would like to say about her. She's a documentary photographer and also an educator. She is based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she has worked, she's a great traveler, and she has worked extensively across Cuba with Santa Fe workshops for the last 12 years. She's made over 50 visits to the island. And I like what she says. She says she's experienced the friendly generosity of a people always willing to share conversation and a cup of coffee. She says that life is lived on the streets of Havana, and she is happiest within its constant motion and layered serendipity. She is also a patient educator, apparently, and I'm happy about that, and for all of us who are doing the workshop this weekend. So we are looking forward to that. She has co-instructed with National Geographic expeditions and taught workshops in Mexico, Japan, India, Spain, and Cuba. She also is co-publisher of Cuba Scene, that's Cuba SEEN. It's a quarterly publication and platform for artists from Cuba and the United States to engage in dialogue through imagery and writing. So Jennifer, thank you for being our juror, for giving the lecture tonight, and we're excited to have you, and we're really looking forward to this evening with you and your stories and your images. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Petra, and hello to everybody out there. Everything with Zoom still impresses me, that I can be in New Mexico talking to you all in Alaska, and that we can focus on Cuba. And like Petra said, a lot of my life is traveling. And so it's a pleasure tonight to actually be in my home wearing shorts and being comfortable and getting to talk about my very favorite place on the planet. It was almost 2 years ago, I think, that Petra first reached out to me about working with the Alaska Photographic Center on their Rarefied light competition. And I'm so pleased that we're finally there, that it's getting to happen. I couldn't have been more impressed with the selection of images that I got to look at. They gave me, I think, almost maybe 3 weeks with those images, and I confidently told them, Petra and Bonnie and Jason, that I would return them, I thought within like a week, and I ended up needing until just 2 days ago to make the final decisions. And it's because I wanted a chance to keep revisiting them. And kudos to everybody who submitted. The variety of voices and mediums. I had a moment of falling in love with Alaska, which is dangerous for me because now I want to go spend more time there. And I would have kept adding more honorable mentions if I could have. I slid in an extra to get to 6, but there are a lot of outstanding pieces. So kudos to everybody. I can't wait to see how the exhibit comes together. The workshop I'm leading this weekend, all about zines, is dear to my heart and is something that over the last 3 or 4 years has become a big part of my photographic practice. I realize now photographers are crazy if they're not taking advantage of the print on demand options that are available. And I think sometimes the idea of a giant coffee table book is maybe a little bit outdated, that people have a lot of books and heavy things, and that zines offer this way to create something quarterly, to create something possibly with the expectation that you're going to publish it again, something that's contemporary and that you can really push the boundaries on how you share your work. And so this weekend, I hear it might be raining in Alaska. So that means it's a good time to stay inside and do something with your images. And we're going to take as deep of a dive as we can into the zine process. I've invited 2 people that are amazing experts in zines to come in and also give guest lectures. The co-publisher of Cuba Scene will talk about the actual specs and a lot of the color management issues and things that usually can frustrate people through the zine process, and maybe we can create a clear path there. And then on Sunday, I've invited Jeff Phillips to also join our group, who does incredible handmade zines. And between that and bouncing some feedback on the work, I'm super excited about it. So to dive into the presentation tonight, let me go ahead and just share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that, because I can't see you guys anymore. Before we go to Cuba, I thought I would start with sharing just a little bit about the other work that I do and why Cuba feels different to me. So this is a picture on my front porch. It is hot and dry, desert, Santa Fe area. And a lot of these pictures I'm starting with are really early work. My photography began from a place of feeling more conceptual, trying to hold on to each piece and control the statement that I was making about it. I've always flipped back and forth between color and black and white. I like both of them for really different reasons. This is one of the first times I ever tried working with a model. And when I look back on a lot of this work, I can feel myself trying to understand ideas of metaphor and how to convey like a deeper meaning than maybe a simple vase of flowers. I really liked portraiture when I was just getting started. And it wasn't until I really started traveling more and working with Santa Fe workshops in a lot of different countries that my photography started to change, and it became less about these controlled conceptual statements and more about responding to different cultures and environments. This picture is from like 3 weeks ago, and that woman is from Russia. I'm in Turkey in that moment, and she was so happy. There was a rainbow. She was wearing a pink water jacket. And I love those moments, trying to see how you can slice something that has some feeling and some heart and that gets beyond like a postcard picture of a place. But with a lot of countries I go to, I'm there for maybe a week or 2 each year. And it's hard to get beneath kind of one-shot wonders in those places. And that's where Cuba has really changed things for me. Over the last 10 years, this is Mexico. Part of the challenge that I try to put to myself when I'm traveling to places is to make the images there match the aesthetic of the place. And so Japan feels very, very orderly to me and structured. And so I like this picture because the image is sort of dependent on the spacing feeling exact. There's also a sense of real quietness to Japan. It's fun to go iconic places and see if there's an original image that I can make. Those gates have been photographed time and time again, but it was really fun to wake up at 5 a.m, hike there with a handmade scarf that my mom had given me and try to create something that had my own stamp to it. This is in Romania. Those are slats in the roof to like vent produce from a long time ago. I've been photographing a lot more with my iPhone lately. And there's a new looseness to my images that's coming with that I'm having a lot of fun with. So about half of my year is spent visiting a mix of all of these places. This is India. India always has this whooshy feeling of so many things going on to me that's why I wanted to photograph it this way. Romania. Again, the iPhone is super fun. Man, you can be fast like a ninja with it when you need to be. So that's a sample of the kind of things I can do other places. But what I've learned from Cuba is whether you're photographing in your own community or one you get to return to, it's the people that let you into their real lives that I think change things. And right now in Cuba, in this little town called Alegria de Pio, that's on the very eastern edge of the island, this family that was so kind to me the last time I was in Cuba that I spent 3 days with them is probably living a moment just like this. And on the left in this image of that family is Carlos Otero, who is a phenomenal photographer from Cuba and has also become one of my very best friends. And he would kill me for showing this picture because he sent this the way Cubans order things. And what he meant was that his flip-flop broke. And the next time I came, can I bring him a pair and he'll pay me back for it? And I share that because I get a lot of pictures like this from Cuba. And they've went through a complicated history. And it's worth paying attention to their relationship, I think, with things while the world is changing and thinking about our consumption. There's a lot we could learn from Cuba and the way they've had to go through a period of almost 60 years of tumultuous, unexpected things. So that's Carlos Otero too. And what I wanted to do tonight was share a little bit from all of my friends that I've met there's perspectives, because each one of them takes a different tone with the way that they photograph Cuba. So this is Cuba Scene, and it's given me a chance to start to showcase some of my photographer friends' work. This is Carlos Otero, who did a project documenting people all across the island. And I love his portraiture. When I look at these pictures, there's a sense of like honor and dignity, I think, that he gives to all of his subjects, no matter how humble they are or where they're from. He lights them, he shoots them vertically, he doesn't have them make casual expressions. It's a way of honoring them. Excuse me. Through him, I've gotten to cross the island back and forth, and he has been an introduction into some of the kindest, most generous people I've ever met, people who invite you in to spend days with their family. This is Nelson Ramirez de Arellano, and he is the director of Fototeca de Cuba. And he's what helped create such a special relationship in Cuba for all of the photographers that we've brought there. He connected us originally with the best photographers in Cuba, and it's that synergy of artists helping artists and ignoring all the complications our governments have that's made it also such a special place to visit. So this is one of his projects that we also published, and it's called Declassified Documents for a History of Cuba. I'd be lying if I told you. And I thought this was such a clever way to interpret Cuba as well. Going back and finding these old iconic photographs. And as soon as you remove the faces from them, it depersonalizes them in a way. It makes it a lot more about the situation. And Nelson was very clever in his color coding across this project. Different colors mean different things. And this is part of the spark that I've taken from Cuba. They are really fearless in just trying different ideas. This is Arian Chang. He changed everything for me in terms of street photography. We've traveled across India, we've traveled across Cuba. He is like lightning with his camera, and his sense of color is pretty much unmatched. He's the one who taught me to start thinking about street photography the way that you think about driving a car, that you need to not be looking just right in front of you. What's going to happen? You need to be 3 blocks ahead of everything that's happening. He moves with his camera in this way that is really, really fluid. And part of what I learned from watching him work is it's not just the situation that's in front of you, it's how you move and it's how you react. And it's the calmness of how you bring up your camera that lets you in tight sometimes to moments like this. You can see his eye for color is just super fun. And that's Jorge Gabilondo on the left and Pepe Gabilondo on the right. And Jorge Gabilondo helped develop lung cancer trial vaccines, and also was a fantastic photographer who passed away during the pandemic. And his son is a musician with the Latin Grammy-winning group Synthesis. So they have totally different interpretations visually, and I wanted to just share them to show Jorge loved waking up in the mornings, and he's got these beautiful palettes that you can only find early in the morning and late at night. And this is another selection of his work, and I can feel like the scientist brain underneath it. And Pepe, who has the soul of a musician and is completely not literal, I think does a really good job of just capturing the essence of the sea, of the palette, of the way the land feels in Cuba. I feel like I can almost hear his images, and such a also fun use of color. So I wanted to acknowledge all of them before sharing my own work, because it's their influence and their stories and their different outlooks into Cuba that I think have really shaped my experience there. This is the America building. It's on Galeano Street. On the 9th floor of this building was the first place I had an apartment in Cuba. In like 2013, I think we moved from staying in hotels to me being part of the staff and staying in a hotel. And that's when, or staying in an apartment. And things really changed for me in that moment when I started to have Cuban neighbors and interact in a little bit more daily life kind of way. Cuba is fun. It's full of unexpected, serendipitous moments. The best way to spend a day there is honestly just completely unstructured. If you walk around open, things seem to happen. This is Camagüey, Cuba. Santiago. So a lot of the work I'm starting with before I share a few more specific projects is work that I think was influenced by Chang. And when I first started becoming friends with him, walking around on the streets with him was so fun. It was like everything that you were thinking about yesterday faded away, everything you were worried about tomorrow, and these micro movements with your camera just like held your attention. And I started to learn more about color. The more time I've spent there, the less I've been worried about photographing, I guess, the old cars in the traditional way, and more interested in trying to make original images. I'm always captivated by the sea because I live in the desert, I'm sure. This is an iPhone shot. A lot more and more my pictures are iPhone. I love it. It's so nimble. There's less that gets in the way of you in the moment. This is in Baracoa, Cuba. That's on the very, very eastern part of the island. It's where Columbus first landed and touched in Cuba, and supposedly was quoted with saying, "This is the most beautiful land that I've ever seen." And Baracoa is that. It is rich and lush and tropical, and Cuba's had its own isolated background, but Baracoa even more so, because you have to fly into Santiago and then take a 5-hour winding road to get there. They live in tandem with the land there. There's a lot of rivers. They farm coconuts and chocolate, cacao. I like moments like this with street photography when it's such a non-moment. It's just people sitting there. But maybe for a second, if you line yourself up just right and everybody moves just the way you need them to, something can come out of it. And I remember watching as that guy in the shirt on the left walked through the frame, and it was so nice. It was like this gift that he made that gesture that happened to fit within the window frame. I like those moments when you're interacting with the world and they don't even know it. It's helped me become a better photographer working in Havana in terms of the light. The tall buildings bounce light in really, really neat ways. And it's forced me to get a little bit more creative with exposures and to learn different angles, that if the light is hot and there's deep shadows, then maybe you want to find a vantage point from above. This is really, really early morning light and watching just shafts of light. And again, I like that space of juggling, sort of, where you're watching the dog on the right and you're watching a woman walk through on the left, and you're wondering if everybody is going to line up for you or not. And sometimes there's just a true element of serendipity to it all. They do that gesture with their hands to show it's a collective taxi that's moving around, and it shows what street people are going to, and you flash hand signals back and forth to show how many people. It's actually an amazing system. There is no route to it all. There's no official guidance. Taxi drivers just drive, and they move a lot of people around in an efficient way. Not everybody has to have their own cars. This is also an iPhone picture. This is from just a few months ago. Again, I think that's why I'm leaning more and more into the iPhone, because I think it's hard to lift your camera up in this moment and not step on the interaction that's happening there. Such a sweet moment with their hands. This is how I think of Cubans. They are warm, they are close, their families are really, really important to them. And I think a lot of that comes from having had a super tumultuous history. And when you can't count on a lot of things, you have to have a network of people that you can lean into. This photograph makes me smile because I was only taking it to document the scissors. This guy gives haircuts every Saturday for free to people in the neighborhood who need them, which is really kind. And I said, is there anything I can bring you that's hard to get? And he said, yes, a new pair of scissors would be amazing. And I actually ended up liking the image, but I've learned a lot of times in Cuba, the temptation is to show too much. There is so much color, so much eye candy, so many different things that are going to want to pull your viewer a lot of different places, that some of my favorite pictures end up being really simplified ones. Good light. Like I was saying, I think compared to the photography that I did in the beginning in Santa Fe and more portraiture as I was getting started, there's a lot more casualness to my images now. I like that. I like the feeling of things bursting out of the frame, that life is bigger than you can even hold within that ratio of your frame. Again, that idea, like I was trying to say with Carlos's portraits, for me, when I change from street photography into portrait mode and decide to actually engage with somebody, part of the time I'm having, excuse me, part of the time I'm having a conversation with them and getting to know them, I'm trying to assess what makes them important, what makes them unique. How can I get them to give me like a really deep look into the camera? The nice thing of Cuba is people often have a lot of time and they're not in a hurry, and it helps to make an image like this to spend 5 minutes with somebody. I don't come in heavy with my camera fast. I let things take the time they need to develop. This moment makes me laugh because it's a really good example of being too slow, I think, with your camera and holding it up to your face for too long. So I saw the guy on the left and I loved his shirt, obviously. I liked the arrow above. I liked the woman on the right who happens to be holding a rose, which kills my soul because I couldn't get that part in the frame. But I was waiting for the woman who was crossing and looking for triangles, looking for that element of like 1, 2, 3 when you're photographing is a really nice way to balance a frame. And so I put up my camera too early and I was waiting for her to walk across. And that's why that guy on the left is giving me that gesture like, hey, are you going to take the photo already? And this was a pretty old photo. I would be quicker in my timing now. I like the problem solving aspect of all travel photography, not just in Cuba, when a situation is complicated because of the background, because of things that get in the way of whatever it is you want your viewer to focus on. And I've learned sometimes taking a knee, using limited depth of field, like you have to lean into all the creative tools you have sometimes to create a frame that's not overly complex. This is the Tropicana. Again, sort of that idea of the Tropicana is punchy and bright and loud. And so trying to photograph it in that style, and versus this is a ballerina from the National Ballet, and trying to photograph her movements in a way that match and that feel in sync. So that's probably like, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of a second shutter speed. Those popsicles are called dura frias, like hard frozen popsicles, and they love them in Cuba. I've learned to be more patient as a photographer in Cuba. I liked the idea that all those elements, there's like a weird reflection thing going on here where I'm shooting through something, but the elements on the left are red. And so waiting, if you know, like basic color theory, green and red pop together. So waiting enough time for something green to actually come through. I'm interested in the way they've used the land in Cuba and projects down the road that I'd like to spend more time with involve some of their organic farming processes and the different route through history that they've taken. Baracoa, it is the most magic place. If I had to pick one city in the world out of all of them I've been to, it's Baracoa. So I wanted to share different ways that I've had a chance to keep trying to reinterpret Cuba. One is through the rain, especially during like May, June. There's some really heavily rainy months. And I finally learned, instead of sloshing around outside in the rain and sopping your shoes, better idea was to ride around in a cool old car and listen to great music and photograph through the windows. This is a picture I like a lot because it feels very, very lucky. And again, that element of serendipity to street photography makes it so fun. It's like you're rewarded sometimes just for showing up. And I was sitting in front of that mural, the background layer, waiting for other things to come in front of it. And I loved the fact that this guy came through with an insignia, and the balance of the woman in the back just between the two is just happy luck. And that moment never lines up again. It's that one moment that you had to be there or it was gone. Same thing here. All three of those cars are about to pull up to a stop. But for the briefest second, while I looked out my back window, I got to catch this. And I was so super lucky that that guy in the blue had the right palette on and decided to wear a blue shirt that day. I think a lot of people probably have this problem, but I have problems like trying to be really present in my life. It's really, really easy for me to think about other things. And street photography demands such acute timing from you that it's almost like meditative. When you're watching, you can't think about anything else. I had fun realizing with this project that the old cars themselves were like the element of the blue or the yellow or the red could be an interesting layer to add in as well. This picture was an accident. I knew it when I was editing because I looked at it and thought, I don't recognize that balance, that compositional balance at all. I never would have taken a picture between two buildings. And I know what happened because I've got the picture before it, which has that pink umbrella centered in the frame. And I think my finger just clicked off an extra frame. But I like it. It reduced down this rainy situation into something a little bit more like an abstract painting. And again, like 15 years of thinking about little other than photography, it tickles me when images kind of make themselves and are better than the picture you were actually trying to make. There's something really like super humbling and wonderful about that. Those pictures inspired me to ask a friend to find me a poem written by Jose Marti that I could tie to the rain. And a friend sent me a poem called La Lluvia en Junio. And the more I read the words, the more I realized, yes, it was sort of about the rain, but it was also about all these other deeper metaphors that Jose Marti, which if you don't know him, you should look him up. He is Cuba's national poet, and his words are wonderful. And so that ended up inspiring this project called Sobre la Tierra Tremula, and it's above the tremulous earth. And this was a project that came about during the pandemic. It paired Marti poems kind of out of context with some of my black and white images. So this says, alone my verse and I consider one another. And I really liked the idea of mirroring that image. There's something quiet and contemplative that it helps maybe accentuate. So the idea with this zine project was to have kind of a back and forth play of emotion, to use some snippets that had this really like warm and positive feeling. Love fits in a single anise seed. Versus some of his lines that also had a lot more punch to them, like a solitary crest, an upright plume, waves as warriors. I worked with a friend from Cuba who was in New York, kind of splicing up this text. And during, I don't know, 2000 and the end of 2001 to maybe why we were stuck at home for a while, this is part of what helped me get over missing Cuba. And I wanted this zine to feel layered and fragile and unexpected and all of the things that are built into being Cuban. So I added in a vellum print, and a good friend of mine, Cotton Miller, helped me print this piece, but I wanted that extra layer to it. And I worked with a designer from Cuba as well, bouncing ideas back and forth. And it was his idea to put the red square over the go this way. And that makes me, for those of you who remember film days, remember looking back at a contact sheet and using like that red tape to mark your favorite frames. And I started ripping pieces out of the zine. Again, in terms of it feeling fragile and unexpected, I wanted it to feel like there was a synergy between pages. I liked the idea of it almost looking like this woman was jumping through the page and following this guy who was on another page. It's the first time I've ever tried something that's a little bit more like a three-dimensional zine. And I learned a lot from doing this, as always happens with these projects. I already want to try another color one in a different way, layering images. But when I started ripping these, I had so much fun. For a moment, it felt like a kid, like making a project. And I think that's part of the power of zines too, that you can, like I was saying, you don't have to be so rigid with them. It's only limited by your imagination and your ideas. So this says the honorable man escapes this world. And I owe credit to the designer that I worked with there as well. He's a really good friend, and I liked the mimic that he made with the image there. So the idea is that this zine builds, and it's got kind of this operatic feel to it. And at the end, it starts talking as much about like life and death and leaning into those quotes by Jose Marti to create this kind of crescendo that then comes back and is very, very quiet at the end of the zine. And the back cover is also ripped. I don't know if I said that the front cover was ripped when we looked at it, but both of those are only like half pages. And when you open it, it reveals El pensamiento de morir, the thought of dying, which is a quote also from Marti, but it made me think about Cuba and the culture and what's happening right now there as well. That I think over 300,000 Cubans have left Cuba in the last 6 months. And that's a cumulative effect of the pandemic a fire that took out part of their refinery, a hurricane, their own internal government issues, our internal government issues with them. And these are two projects that are the projects I'm going to go to Cuba with over the next year. I found a whole bunch of these really neat old ID cards. And so I want to try to track these people down and see if I can find any of them that are living. And if I can't find them, if I can find relatives who can tell me about them. They're really, really beautiful old documents. And one thing I've learned about creating projects is sometimes like you don't have to have this idea of trying to save the world with it. You can find this little slice that lets you in, and it's going to take you down roads you didn't expect, and it's going to let you meet people you didn't expect. And part of it comes from just putting on the blinders to having some kind of project. I think these little booklets are so cool. I have, I think, 12 of them. And this is another project that I'm working on, and it's trying to just look at things more carefully. Again, a little bit that idea of how fragile and interconnected things are, but also the meditative part of photography and slowing down, looking at something like a little piece of coral, and instead of just quickly acknowledging it, taking the time to pick it up and to look at the way the structure is connected and to think about how it fits in with the land. And this is, I think, my last picture from Cuba. And this is a picture that after my last 3-week road trip across Cuba, we barely had enough gas to get back. We'd had to go to 2 different government agencies because they have such extreme gas shortages right now. And this was when we worked out the math to realize we were actually going to be able to make it back to Havana, and poured rum for the gods to throw out the window. I hope you all are still there. I think that's all I have. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Really appreciate it. Wonderful work. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Folks, feel free to either raise your hands or start a Q&A. I noticed that, Jennifer, can you see the Q&A there at the bottom?
Oh, yeah. Let me click on that.
So I'll read that out so that we have it in the video. I have a obligatory gear question for Jennifer. This is from Sarah Manriquez. You talk a lot about enjoying the camera on your phone. I have gone on entire trips now and left my DSLR at home because my phone accomplishes so much of what I need, and it takes me out of the moment a lot less. I was curious, when you do carry your camera and aren't using your phone, what type of equipment are you working with? Do you aim to keep it light, or are you more concerned with a specific camera you love?
That's a good question. Got to have an obligatory gear question. So prior to the pandemic, I was all Nikon. I used to have a Hasselblad that I shot with for a while, but Nikon 850, 800, Z7. I'm big about wanting the camera to feel completely second nature. Like, you should be able to move the dials to control your exposure without even looking or knowing where those are. So for me, only having like one camera, people who switch between different camera lines, I don't know how you do that. Like, for me, I need it to be totally second nature. So when the pandemic happened, I started teaching online and I started teaching iPhone, and I realized I had noodled with it, but I had never really put it through its paces. And so I haven't clicked the shutter on my Nikon since the pandemic. I traveled everywhere the last 2 years, all around the world with only the phone. because I know myself well enough. And I know that if I would have brought the Nikon, I would have leaned into using it. And it's not that I think the phone is a perfect tool. Every tool has its limitations. And you want to go on Safari, you're going to hate your phone. And if you don't have an extra battery pack, you're going to hate your phone. And I've made every mistake you can make with the thing, but now I finally trust it. And I've just printed a 20 by 30 raw image off of my phone and was impressed by the quality. So I'm learning that it can actually go that high. In terms of lenses on equipment, I'm a big proponent of one camera, one lens, 28 millimeter, 35, something like that. I left a 35 on my camera for 2 years straight. And it's because it gives you the same voice. Like whatever lens you're using is almost like your narration voice. And so if you go from like fisheye to telephoto to 50 millimeter, it's kind of harder sometimes to make something feel really, really cohesive. And if you use the same lens, you know the frame before you even put it to your eye, which is really handy.
Great. And Sarah responds with, whoa, incredible. So Callie's got a question. Can you explain more about a zine, just basically what it is?
Yeah, so a zine is just a magazine. I think we just started trying to be hipper and calling it a zine. I don't actually know the definition difference between it, but now there's so many options to print your own things. Blurb is one of them and probably the most well-known, but MagCloud is an option. Smart Press, there's a whole bunch of different tracks you can take. And what makes them so cool is they're affordable to share. So if you want to go get an exhibit with a gallery, or you want somebody to remember your photography, you can either send them a link or you can send them a zine. And I can tell you, when people send me zines, it immediately puts you 2 steps ahead. It shows you know about sequencing. It shows you know how to create something that has one consistent message and voice across it. And they're my favorite way now to share my work. I get much more traction out of sharing zines than I do through like social media or anything like that.
Great. Melissa B says, thank you so much. Really enjoyed your lecture. Hope to take a workshop from you in Santa Fe. Javed says, Jennifer, incredible presentation. You've been to Cuba for such a long time. If you could highlight one positive and one negative change over the years since your first trip to Cuba regarding life of Cubans or for Cubans, what would those be?
And it has not taken the trajectory that everybody expected. I remember Santa Fe in like 2014, I think, using this line for their marketing, like, get to Cuba before the Starbucks and McDonald's are here. And my Cuban photographer friend, the older one, that Jorge Gabilondo, who comes from a much more revolutionary background, was not impressed by that. And he said, you have no idea how strong like this government foothold is, and I don't think it's going to change that fast. And it hasn't. And since I started going there, internet has gotten more accessible to them, which is good. They're more connected, but quality of life is still tough. You live a lean existence as a Cuban. And right now with the gas shortages, it's a lot more complex for them. I don't know anymore what I think necessarily will change it, but I think there's a lot of people in the United States who aren't aware of exactly what's happening there. Russia is now looking at investing in Cuba, and China is investing in Cuba, and there's all these complicated things with the election in Florida. And my space has always just been through meeting these great artists and these people who they don't have a bent either which way in the governments. All they want to do is be able to create their art and actually interact with like a global commerce system. They don't have credit cards. They don't have any way to do any of those things.
Bonnie, I notice you have your hand up.
Yes, I didn't have a question. I just thank you, Jennifer. And I loved your comment about if everything lines up, those moments. And I see that in your images tonight, but I also saw it in the image that we used for the Rarefied Light postcard. One of my favorites. So thank you for the instructiveness and for the image.
Thank you so much.
We've got some other comments from Alejandro. Thank you all. Thank you all, organizers, and thank you, Jennifer, for showing us your work and shedding light on those artists in the island. Thank you for highlighting Cuba, which despite its beauty, it's very neglected by the tourists that do make it to the island. Thank you all. Petra asks, do you mostly photograph in RAW on your phone? Thank you for sharing your wonderful work with us. And Rarefied Light opens up October 6th at IGCA in Anchorage.
Wait to see y'all's exhibit. Yes, only RAW on your phone. And I know this from doing that wrong too. I photographed a good part of a Romania trip on live mode, which your phone, it wants you to keep putting back on live. You got to go into this preference that says retain the setting of keeping live off, because live is awesome. I mean, you can like stop moments and things, and someday in the future, all this decisive moment stuff is going to go out the window because we're going to be able to just slide over to a decisive moment, but it ain't there yet. And you'll be super sad if you get something you really want and it's not on RAW.
Matt, you've got a question?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Great presentation. And yeah, I had a thought about the decisive moment thing that seems like you kept coming back to, and you just referenced it with that. I did not know that. I didn't know you could shoot in RAW on your phone. I had no clue about that.
I don't know about with Androids, but with iPhone, I think 13 and 14, maybe even 12, but I know 13 and 14, they've got RAW now. And where the iPhone stumbles is if you crop, and you crop into something, even if it's RAW a long ways, it gets chunky pretty quickly. And so like everything, there's a balance, but it's kind of been good for my practice because it really, really makes me lean into trying to make my frames as perfect as I can without a super terrible crop into them. That's where it kind of stumbles.
Mm-hmm. And then just the terminology that you used, or I thought you used it in reference to the so-called decisive moment, was happy luck. I like that. Happy luck. It's somehow the decisive moment seems kind of authoritarian, but happy luck sounds like a nice dish on a Chinese menu, maybe. I don't know.
I like that a lot.
And then when you share a zine, how do you share a zine? Do you print it yourself and then hand it to people, or is it print on demand for the person who's receiving it? Or seems like, especially if you're tearing pages and so forth, you must hand them an actual hard copy of your physical.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to do it. Blurb has like a print on demand service where you can just upload addresses, or you can send someone a link and they can do the entire commerce part. They're the easiest in terms of if you don't want to put your hands on it. Smart Press is who I use for Cuba scene, and we print with them because we're doing a higher volume, but I think their quality is a little bit better than Blurb. I think you'd want to be printing over 200 copies probably to want to like move to Smart Press. The Sobre La Triera was also Smart Press, and ripping each one of them. And that one I actually editioned. I made 150, and each one is hand signed and stamped. And I realized they're going to change. I'm not going to rip them all the same. I'm already bored of some of the ripping I'm doing, and so I'm going to change along the way. And I don't think you're supposed to do that when you edition something, but that's the fun of making something for yourself. And I feel a really fun sense of casualness with zines. That you can make them feel collectible and precious if you want to, but you can also just use them as a marketing piece that people will actually hang on to, I think.
And do you sign them and number them? Did I hear that correctly? Yeah.
The Sobre La Tierra I did because it's got the extra sleeve, like vellum print and some other things. But the other zines I haven't, that I've just used as promo pieces. I was trying to make this one feel a little bit special and different.
And you can pick paper and and how about bindery? How are they bound?
Those are all good questions. So there's paper samples from a lot of the companies that are definitely worth getting because you've got matte and glossy options and just different thicknesses and weights that really matter. And bindings, you lose a lot to the gutter in the traditional binding, but there are some. I think MagCloud has a different option that's got some other kind of binding to it. There's a few different options. I usually use the traditional kind that has a spine just because I like making a little spine on the side. But if you print a double page, you learn very quickly that you have to splice the image in kind of a special way to create extra gutter space. Otherwise it falls in.
Right. Well, thank you.
Great. So Callie has another question. What's your favorite iPhone app?
Probably TikTok, even though that's embarrassing to admit. I like TikTok. They've got such good video transitions and things on there. But in terms of photography apps, I don't use that many of them. I keep waiting for Lightroom Mobile to get its act together because my entire archive is in Lightroom. And so I would love to use Lightroom Mobile and have those connect. But there's some fluky things still with Lightroom Mobile that I don't love. And so once that happens, that they really make that a cleaner process, I'll use that as my capture app and my organization app. But for now, I use Snapseed sometimes for editing. But I try not to edit other than if I'm just throwing something quickly on social media on my phone. Like I follow a practice of my iPhone images go over to my computer, they go into my standard Lightroom database. I think you got to be careful with your phone that you understand the workflow, like of where the images are going and that they're backed up. It's a little spooky that we could lose archives really easily that way.
Other questions? Bonnie, do you have anything to end with?
No, not really. We'll convene tomorrow at 5:30 Alaska time and look forward to it, Jennifer.
Me too. Thank you all so much.